The Maine People Podcast, available everywhere. Click subscribe so you never miss an episode. Everyone's familiar with this view and that floating restaurant, and on Maine People Podcast this time around, since 1982, that legendary part of Portland's waterfront has been a family-run restaurant. Johnny DiMillo is with me today for the Maine People Podcast. Thank you very much for being on. I know we have been trying for a long time to organize this and get it scheduled, so I appreciate you finding the time. It took a snowy day to do it, right?
Happy to be here. Yeah. Sorry it took so long to get together.
Yeah, no worries at all. So you grew up really in the family restaurant business right from the start, you know, even before this restaurant was in place.
I did. There's a funny scene in The God where he says, "Just what I thought it was. Oh, they pulled me back in."
Yeah.
I tried a couple of different things to get out, but my old man ended up roping me back in 1996.
You think it'll be that same way for your family, for your kids?
Actually, my oldest son, Dominic, wants to fill my shoes, which is great. I'd love to have him. My girls, they seem to want to do their own thing, and Rocco is only 4.5, so I'm not going to press him too hard just now.
He'll decide. You know, right now it's trucks and dinosaurs, I'm sure, like every other 4-year-old boy. What was the best part about growing up in the restaurant business, and with the whole, with a family restaurant? What was the best part of it? We actually have a picture of a lot of your family here. I pulled this from I think maybe the DiMillo's Facebook page. Is this all family in the photo?
Yes, it is. Yep. And at one point, all those individuals were working there.
What's the best part
shrunk a little
for you?
Since then.
Coming into this family restaurant business that most memorable?
The fact that we actually can stand each other, that can't be said for every family. And because there's so many of us, that's a lot. It does. And because everybody's so busy, sometimes it's the only opportunity to see each other.
So it's
and
not exactly
and there's a trust level too. You can't always trust your family, but 9 times out of 10, versus strangers off the street, of course you want to have your family by your side helping you out.
Well, 42 years later for DiMillo's Floating Restaurant, I mean, the family's obviously doing something right.
Yeah. 1954, actually. We've been floating since 82, but we were across the street 20 years at that location, and my father had a 2 smaller places before that, so it's been quite a while.
What's in those locations now? Are they restaurants now, or are they shops on Commercial Street?
Across the street, where we were for 20 years before that, is the Seabags location, which used to be a furniture store before that, I think.
How much?
And that's the place that I remember growing up. Between 6th grade and 8th grade.
How much has the Portland waterfront changed since, and how much has DiMillo's had a part in that? I was looking, taking this video earlier, looking at Commercial Street, knowing how much Commercial Street has just changed with your parking lot entrance there on the pier, and I know over the years, superficially the buildings stay the same, but the contents of the buildings all change. DiMillo's has been probably integral in making a lot of that happen, making a lot of it possible.
Yeah, I didn't see it personally because I was too young, and you probably heard stories too, but when, in the 60s and 70s, Commercial Street wasn't a place you wanted to be caught after the sun went down. It was rough, it was edgy, and, from my father, he was wackadoo enough to open up a floating restaurant, but to put a really nice upscale restaurant in that area, it took some nerve.
It certainly became a focal point and a center for things to build around. I think it worked out pretty well for the people of Portland too, and for the old port, for redevelopment of that.
Yeah, family's not going to take all the credit, but I would wager that being the mainstay as long as we have, it probably gave some other businesses some legs or some courage to stick it out for a while, and while the culinary scene that has just taken off, just in the Old Port area alone, not to mention the entire peninsula, it's nuts. My father never dreamed it would go to that level.
Well, you certainly have a top level chef in Chef Melissa at DiMillo, so plenty to be proud of there too.
Yeah, very much so. Her down east heritage, pops through her every day. She still reminds me a lot that she grew up raking blueberry, packing sardines in Eastport.
Well, that's a true Maine out right there.
Yeah.
Do you think? No, I know for the longest time, DiMillo's Floating Restaurant was one of a kind on the East Coast and maybe in the U.S. Is it still the only of its kind of an actual floating restaurant that is just tied up?
There are other floating restaurants. I think we're still the largest one on the East Coast. Don't quote me on that. There are other floating restaurants, not to that size. We don't have to go any further than down at Wells, Kennymug for Spirit Misses at I don't remember what kind of sailboat it is, but there's a lot of little restaurants like that. But the size of DiMillo's, I think we're number one.
It's pretty large. That's where my wedding was. My wife and I got married there. It was a pretty great day. I should have included. She's not going to be happy with me. I didn't include a photo in this podcast from our wedding day.
Better than this.
Man, I can't believe I forgot. She actually even reminded me, and here I still forgot. I wanted to.
You're on
I'm in trouble now. So I wanted to show this video from outside. This is something that's along the promenade there on the pier in front of DiMillo's. And I think a lot of people, especially tourists when they come to Maine, and a lot of Mainers don't even know that this piece of the Berlin Wall is there. Can you speak, Johnny, to how it got there?
Yeah, it's not a very interesting story, but this random guy, I didn't know him. None of my father didn't even know him. He just, he knew of the restaurant, and he just asked my father, said, I have this piece of the Berlin Wall that he had, absolutely nothing to do with. And he said, I'd love to have it on your property. And at the time, we didn't have much going on that promenade other than trees. We have a few things now, but, it was a perfect spot for it. We set it up and it kind of took off. It draws a lot of attention. Unfortunately, a couple of criminals there used to be two, I don't know what material there were, tin or lead, but there were on the backside of those, there were some plates. They were in Russian, they were in German, so I don't know if it said from the location they were at or why where these pieces came from. Those were nice. Those are nice to have. I wish I had taken pictures of them before somebody had stolen them.
Oh, that's too bad. I don't know if I'm disappointed or fascinated that there's not much story to the actual story other than some random guy called up and said, "Hey, you want this?" That's
and because it happened when my father was still remotely healthy and still large and in charge. He called the shots. He didn't ask us if we wanted to do anything. He just did it. So, if we dug deep enough, maybe we could find this guy's name and where he came from. But right now, that's all I got, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll just let that build into urban legend and see what comes of it.
Sure.
Start some stories on the internet. Johnny DiMillo is on the Maine People podcast this morning. You know the name DiMillo's if you live in Portland or anywhere in southern Maine or anywhere in New England, most likely. One of the stories you probably never heard about your own restaurant is it's about one of, I'll say, the most well-known country singers of all time currently. And I'm going to tell you that story, what happened in your restaurant, that I bet you don't even know, coming up after the break. How about that?
Okay, great.
The way my dad brought me up was always to work hard and to treat people well.
You ready to go for a ride?
We try to keep our goal to make people feel comfortable buying their cars and feel comfortable with the people they're working with.
Nice. Oh, it looks good over here.
So become part of our family. We really mean that. Without question, we're in this together.
We're going to take care of you and treat you like your family anyways.
This looks awesome.
Yankee Ford has so many people willing to help and make this tough time a little bit easier.
Radio207.com only plays original country music from Maine singers, songwriters, and bands. Streaming online and on your smart speaker. Radio207.com is on the air now. Radio207.com. Only Maine, only country music. Your next online event can be perfect thanks to virtualproductionsgroup.com. The Maine People podcast couldn't happen without them, and they can make your remote streaming event absolutely technically perfect. High quality live and pre-recorded productions for corporate events, weddings, tournaments, charities, and more with virtualproductionsgroup.com.
Maine People podcast sponsored by Chubby Dog Coffee. You can make your order and use the promo code BELLA and take 15% off your first order. That will help support this podcast for future episodes. Chubby Dog Coffee, chubbydogcoffee.com. So Johnny DiMillo on the Maine People podcast. I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about one of the most popular country singers currently on the country chart in America. Something that happened in your restaurant that you don't even know. It happened years ago with this person. His name is Jason Aldean. I bet you know it.
Yes, very much
first,
so.
I want to show this picture of someone else. Thank you for your service and your years dedicated to the United States of America as a U.S. Army veteran. You served in Afghanistan and Kuwait and Iraq. And can you tell us a story about this day? Because I know these faces right here. That's Ted Nugent and that's Toby Keith right there.
Yeah, that was an MWR, or a USO tour they were doing when I was stationed in Kuwait and Iraq. They kept their itinerary pretty hush-hush for security, obviously. And it was a couple days before we had heard that some country celebrities were coming to Camp Casey, where I was at the time. And it's a tiny tent. I don't, maybe barely 100 people could fit in that stuff. And we found out maybe hours before that it was Nugent and Toby Keith and tickled pink. We got in there and those two just started ripping it up. People just losing their mind. And it was pretty neat that, there's a lot of cities that give their time and their talent like that. For the troops, which is, pretty generous. And a funny note on that, Ted Nugent actually came into the restaurant, probably 10 years after that. He was sitting in the lounge. Now I've always been a big Ted Nugent fan, and I'm just sitting watching him, just waiting for my time to go over, and he sees me because I was pretty much watching him the entire time he was eating.
Yeah.
He waves me over and he says, if you look at me, I'm going to turn to stone. He says, are you a fan? So we get talking. And then I told him, I said, the last time I saw you was in a tent in the middle of Kuwait. And he was, because he's a big supporter of the troops too. And he was just tickled pink. He actually gave me one of his commander coins. It's just kind of funny to connect the dots like that.
That's really cool and generous of
Yeah.
him with his time and kind of him just to say, get it over with. Let's go. Come over.
Seriously. Yeah, and I wowed him even further because I was actually stationed with a guy, 20, I don't know how many years before that, in Texas with a guy that was his neighbor. And I got an autographed picture for when this guy went home on Christmas break. He came back and he had autographed pictures from Ted Nugent for all his buddies he was hanging out with. And I rattled off his name and he actually remembered him.
Wow, that's great. I'm going to tell you that Jason Aldean story in a second. I want to flip through some other pictures from my own photo album because whether you're aware of it or not, I like to bring, when country stars come to town, as one of the morning show hosts on WPOR, like to bring people to somewhere great like DiMillo's, which is a beautiful view and it's a floating restaurant and the food is great. Here's a group dinner we had with Midland and Morgan Wallen and a bunch of people from the radio station sitting at a big long table there having lobster. There's my wife and I and Morgan Wallen out on in front of the boat there. This is Devin Dawson on the left, a country singer, and maybe you recognize Dan and Shay on the right. They are superstars at this point.
They just saw them. You saw Dan and Shay last August at Country Fest for Kenny Chesney's last show on tour.
Yeah, I can't say I brought Kenny Chesney there, but he's probably been there on his own. And another country singer, Travis Denning, here posing out front.
Wow,
what's the story? What's the story with that suit, by the way? It's been there as long as I can remember.
Great suit. It's a great story. There was a guy named William Clark. He actually used that suit, and he dove up and down the east coast of Maine, and he was a very good customer. Just to the left of that guy with who's pointing,
that's me.
Is a picture of just behind him is a picture of Clarky, they used to call him. He owned that suit, and when he smoked himself to death, I mean, there aren't too many pictures of him without a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. He was a very good customer. He was a good friend of ours, and he insisted that when he passed away that he wanted that suit to stay in the restaurant. And we were tickled pink. It's one of the most photographed artifacts in the restaurant for sure. And,
well, no doubt. It's in a very posable location.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but when Clarky passed away, some of his kids came out of the woodwork and they actually tried to come down and take it from us. But we had, some of the other family members kind of set him straight and told him, nope, that's where Dad wants it to stay. And thankfully, it's still there.
That's great. It's very scary. It's like, it reminds me of an old Scooby-Doo episode that had some diver in the bottom of the ocean coming up, and the gang caught him. I'm sure it was, somebody in disguise.
It's funny when the younger kids come in, they always ask their parents, why is that astronaut suit there?
All right, history lesson, kids. I guess I should tell you the story of Jason Aldean, who was doing a show for WPOR years ago, and after the show, went to the restaurant with he and his band. They were like, we're just going to go out tonight and get something to eat. We're just going to go on our own. And they went to DiMillo's. They had a great meal. Everything was wonderful. And then they realized nobody had a wallet or a credit card to pay for their food, which meant they couldn't get a ride back to their hotel. They couldn't check into their hotel, and they couldn't do anything, and they couldn't even pay for their own meal at the restaurant, and they hadn't brought anyone from management or the radio station with them. So they're stuck with a nice tab, I'm sure, and had to wait for someone from their management company to fly up from Nashville to Portland to come and rescue them and pay the bill. And meanwhile, they slept on the second floor in a storage area, and none of you knew they were there.
I bet somebody got spanked for that one.
And that is now one of the biggest stars in country music. You could put one of those signs. Jason Aldean slept here. Unfortunately, it's like where you store tables and chairs.
That's all right.
Johnny, do you ride a bike?
Bicycle?
Because no, a motorcycle. I know there's an annual ride
Yes,
to the
I
Maine
do.
Children's Cancer Program. So I'm not sure if you're
I
in
do.
this video or not, because if this is coming up again this year, this is a good time to promote it before we wrap up. I'm sure you're somewhere in that long line of riders.
I am. I was actually on that ride. That was that last? It might have been last year. I didn't make.
I
Yeah.
think it was.
Yeah.
Tell me about this, because I know DiMillo's has no shortage of charitable contributions and belonging to different organizations and helping many organizations around the Southern Maine area.
Yeah. My older brother Stephen got connected with the Maine Children's Cancer Program. I don't know, years ago. They still do annual benefits to be at the restaurant a lot. They've moved. But my brother Stephen had the idea of, we all love to ride, and we know, 100 or so people that also ride with us. We do 2 rides a year. We do a mystery ride, which is just fun, and we do the Maine Children's Cancer Program ride, which, over the last few years, it just keeps raising more and more money. It's just, it's a group of like-minded people who are very generous and, just want to help out. And it's turned out to be pretty lucrative for the Maine Children's Cancer Program, as far as donations, because everybody's so generous.
Well, I would love to ride with you guys, but I don't have a motorcycle. Motorcycles frighten me, and unless you have a sidecar, I'm out. And I didn't see any sidecar.
You can grab the support vehicle. How about that?
Okay, that's perfect. I like that. At least I have an option to participate and help out.
Yes.
Johnny, thanks so much for being on the Maine People Podcast, learning a little more about you and about your family and about the restaurant, and helping to show Mainers how great we've really got it living. I appreciate it.
We do have a pretty good. Thanks for having me.
The Maine People Podcast, available everywhere. Click subscribe so you never miss an episode.